The McMinn County Board of Education met in a called meeting on Monday, January 10th, 2022 at 5:30 p.m. at the McMinn County Center for Educational Excellence. Attendance was as follows. Rob Shamblin, present. Tony Allman, present. Jonathan Pierce, present. Donna Castile, present. Mike Lowry, present. Mike Cochran, present. Sharon Brown, present. Quentin Howard, present. Bill Irvin, present. Denise Cunningham, present. Chairman Brown called the meeting to order and presented the agenda. Tony Allman made the motion to accept the agenda. Quentin Howard seconded. A unanimous voice vote was recorded, and the motion carried. There were no requests to address the board. Agenda. Discussion on 8th grade ELA curriculum. Chairman Brown asked Director Parkinson to address the board.
The values of the county are understood. There is some rough, objectionable language in this book, and knowing that, and hearing from many of you and discussing it, 2 or 3 of you came by my office to discuss that, I consulted with our attorney, Mr. Scott Bennett. After consulting with him, we decided the best way to fix or handle the language in this book was to redact it. Considering copyright, we decided to redact it to get rid of the 8 curse words and the picture of the woman that was objected to. I'm certainly not an expert in ELA. We have people that do this every day, and I would like to call on them to explain to you what they have explained to me, and that is our 2 instructional supervisors, Mrs. Julie Gooden and Mr. Stephen Brady. Last year, we only had 1 supervisor that was in charge of pre-K all the way through 8th grade, Mrs. Melisson Knight, and she is familiar with this curriculum also. I would like to call on all of them to give a little more detail than I can.
A question from us. Do you have something in mind for your outcome that you are wanting so we can frame things around that? Or do you want us to go through the book and what it does with the curriculum?
From the board's standpoint, I will speak, obviously. We have not discussed this among ourselves. I'm sure each individual board member here has in their own minds, their thoughts as to what they think should happen. At this point, we have not had this discussion.
I have one question. Is there a substitute for this book that we have?
No. And that is a short answer to a longer discussion. If you would like, I have some stuff I can run through with you that explains what our curriculum is and how it works and walk you through how this book fits into the bigger picture of what our kids are studying.
This is a book for the 8th grade on a 3rd grade reading level.
No, that is incorrect.
So the 3.0 on the front of the book doesn't stand for 3rd grade reading?
Oh, no. What you are referring to is the AR number that is assigned to the book. This is an 8th grade middle school level book, not just because of the words, but because of the content and the deeper meaning to what is going on in the book.
Some of this vulgar and inappropriate behavior can be whited out, but because of copyright, it is like BITCH. They can only white out the ITCH, just like the GD word. They have to leave GD. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
When we see something on television that is a direct quote from an actor or a president, something where it has that inappropriate language, they will blur it out or white out parts of it, or they will bleep it.
I understand all that, but being in the schools, educators and stuff, we don't need to enable or somewhat promote this stuff. It shows people hanging. It shows them killing kids? Why does the educational system promote this kind of stuff? It is not wise or healthy.
I can talk of the history. I was a history teacher, and there's nothing pretty about the Holocaust. And for me, this was a great way to depict a horrific time in history. Mr. Spiegelman did his very best to depict his mother passing away, and we are almost 80 years away. It's hard for this generation. These kids don't even know 9/11. They were not even born. For me, this was his way to convey the message. Are the words objectionable? Yes. There's no one that thinks they aren't, but by taking away the first part, it's not changing the meaning of what he's trying to portray in copyright.
I understand that on TV and maybe at home, these kids hear worse, but we are talking about things that if a student went down the hallway and said this, our disciplinary policy says they can be disciplined, and rightfully so. And we are teaching this and going against policy?
I think that anytime you're teaching something from history, people did hang from trees. People did commit suicide and people were killed. Over 6 million were murdered. I think the author is portraying that because it is a true story about his father that lived through that. He is trying to portray that the best he can with the language that he chooses that would relate to that time. Maybe to help people who haven't been in that aspect in time to actually relate to the horrors of it. Is the language objectionable? Sure. I think that is how he uses that language to portray that.
I am not denying it was horrible, brutal, and cruel. It's like when you're watching TV and a cuss word or a nude scene comes on, it would be the same movie without it. Well, this would be the same book without it. I may be wrong, but this guy that created the artwork used to do the graphics for Playboy. And you can look at his history, and we're letting him do graphics and books for students in elementary school. If I had a child in the 8th grade, this ain't happening. If I had to move him out and homeschool him or put him somewhere else, this is not happening.
Even for me, Mr. Ullman, you know I have an 8th grader. Even if you did pull this book, I would want him to read it because we have to teach our kids. Are these words okay? No, not at all. That is not acceptable. But the problem is that we are 80 years removed from the Holocaust itself. I just think this is a grave starting point for our teachers. I'm very passionate about history, and I would hate to rob our kids of this opportunity. Are we going to be teaching these words outside of this book as vocabulary words? No. You know me better than that, Tony Ullman.
I know, and I am not being argumentative. I am just trying to wrap my mind around, because if a student sitting in the cafeteria decides to read this out loud and complete the sentences, what are you going to do? It's in the book you're teaching them. So what are you going to do?
We can say that the students know what that means, but they know what that means if they have been exposed to it prior to. The B word doesn't have to mean that unless you've been exposed to it before. It's not like we're teaching that or exposing them to that. We are trying our best to redact the best we can and follow the law. And that is what we felt like we have done to address the concerns of that language the best we could. We think it is a valuable book, and most of the supervisors here have read it.
We used to order from Tennessee Book Company, and these come from Learn Zillion. Is that correct? Why did we change?
You can still order through Tennessee Book Company, the books, if we wanted to, but our contract was through Learn Zillion. It's just another platform, a way of ordering.
The Common Core curriculum, I may be wrong, but isn't it state law? It has to be posted on the website so people can view it. I haven't been able to find that website.
It is aligned to Tennessee standards, so we do have that, and it is posted on the curriculum page.
What exactly are you saying you can't find?
The curriculum of the book that is taught. Maybe I'm not looking at the right website. I have been trying to find that, and I can't.
Okay, I'd like to interject here. We can do this all night. I want everybody to have the freedom to ask the questions, to hear your presentations. Is there something more that you all had planned to present to us?
Well, the part of understanding the book's place in the curriculum is understanding how the curriculum is built anyway. When we were in school, we would hop from one book to the next. we would study one book a few days, do a test, then move on to the next book. I want to tell you why curriculum is important and how the pieces of it are designed and how we have an opportunity to teach more than standards.
Stephen Brady presented a presentation that included a passage from Hoard's Dairyman.
Carbohydrates often make up 60% or more of the ration dry matter and provide 70 to 80% of the cow's energy needs. Achieving the right balance between fiber and fermentable carbohydrates, such as starch, optimizes salivary buffering and rumen acid production. This combination promotes good rumen health. Optimal rumen pH is central to ruminant health and productivity. And of course, cows are ruminants. Low rumen pH is often associated with reduced de novo synthesis of fatty acids in the mammary gland. These short-chain fatty acids produced from scratch in the udder use building blocks of acetate and butyrate from fiber fermentation in the rumen. So getting the ration content of fiber and starch right to optimize rumen pH and fiber fermentation is critical. The interaction between dietary fiber and starch has been evaluated in many studies over the years. In particular, research has focused on how feeding too much starch reduces rumen fiber fermentation and energy available to the cow. So the question here, what feed should I use as their dietary supplement? Now, what does this have to do with anything? My dad can answer this. He could go to the co-op and they would know exactly what all these words meant. I don't have a clue what I just read. And I would say many of you don't either. So, here's the problem. What we're finding is that students can't have rigorous learning on topics they know little to nothing about. When we jump from one topic to the next, all our time is spent just figuring out words and what they mean. If I go back to that article, we're going to focus on what's a rumen, what's a dietary starch. So the way curriculums are designed now is that we build background knowledge, we center it around some kind of engaging topic that's worthy of our time, so that students can then move on beyond just figuring out what vocabulary is. Now we can answer questions like, what's the main idea? What are the details? How does this compare to that? And have those more rigorous conversations. What does that have to do with curriculum, and why is curriculum important? There is a balance here between building that background knowledge and using grade level text. I mean, I can pull out a picture book of cows, but is that really at the level I need to make me have those deeper conversations about cows? So there are two things you have to balance here: building that knowledge and using rigorous grade level text. Going back to our ELA modules, here's how they are built. I have some central text here like Ford's Dairyman, and I'm going to spend about 2 months reading that. I'm going to pull in books about cows, articles, might look at some videos, I may interview some farmers. Everything that helps me understand what all those words mean. Now, the curriculum that we use is called EL. What does that stand for? I see some teachers here. What does that stand for? Expeditionary learning. So the whole idea is that students go on these expeditions and they will spend 2 months or so on these different expeditions, and that's their modules. In 8th grade, that is 4 things. We do Latin America, we learn about food, the Holocaust, and Japanese internment. So in a module, there's 4 big things that go into that. Here is number 1 from our state. What standards are we going to teach? Now, so we think about that and what topic gives us an avenue to teach those standards that are worthy of our time, that we are going to spend building that background knowledge. Now that we have our topic, what kind of task could we have our students do that shows students have mastered the content? That is more than just answering a question. That is them actually doing some stuff. More than a yes or no question, that is them actually doing stuff. It's a project that shows that in-depth learning. All of that leads to what text is best to accomplish these goals. We're looking at text structure. Kids should know what different kinds of books look like, whether it's true or false. One of the standards here talks about conveying mood and powerful language and how we express ourselves through writing and verbal. Those are our standards. So the topic for this module, Holocaust, I looked online. This one is the United States Holocaust Museum, which recommends 6th grade and above to begin teaching that. It's certainly a topic that is worthy of our time. It's engaging and interesting for students. And that's something that they are curious about. As we get into it, it's age appropriate according to all these different sites, and it's meaningful to future learning. In 8th grade social studies, students only study up to about the Civil War, that time period. Next year in high school, they're going to jump in the deep end on World War II and study all that went on during that time period. The thinking here is the best place to give them a little introduction to the Holocaust and things that went on during World War II. This module helps students begin building their background knowledge as they prepare for high school. The task that students do at the end of this module, after they spend a couple of months talking about the Holocaust, studying this project that they do that shows they understand what went on, they will write their own narrative and pretend that they have interviewed a Holocaust upstander. They're going to create graphic novel panels to visually represent a section of their narrative, and they will present that to their peers. You have all these standards that we saw addressed earlier. They're addressed through this project. And last part, how do we get there? Well, here's our text. So our anchor text is mouse, and we have all these supplemental things that we look at throughout this module that build to that anchor text. We look at interviews from Holocaust survivors, news articles from BBC, Los Angeles Times, Guardian, survivor stories, and excerpts from other books. There's even a section where we go to the Jewish virtual library and look at some selections from that. All of these go to build that background knowledge. It's grade level appropriate for our students. For example, we wouldn't bring in the Diary of Anne Frank book at this point because that is written at roughly 4th, 5th grade level. Beyond what we do in the module, beyond just addressing the standards and teaching that, there's one more piece to the curriculum that we forget about and that we kind of brush over, but it's really important. There is an opportunity in this curriculum for us to teach habits of character. Yeah, I'm going to go back to Hord's Dairyman for a minute. I mentioned that I flipped through these often as a kid. Well, I saw the word damn as I was reading through that magazine, and I thought, oh my goodness, Dad, what do we have going on here? Well, thankfully, I had a dad that would take me and teach me and say, son, that is not the word you are thinking about.
Spelled different and referred to different.
Exactly. But, as a kid, in my mind, I am thinking, oh my goodness, that's a bad word. So Dad takes me and he explains that when you add an N to the end, that's different. That's a word we don't say, and it means something else. Here, we're talking about something to do with cattle. In the curriculum, every lesson has the habits of character part of it, where we teach our students the difference between right and wrong. We teach them to be empathetic. We teach them to be ethical people, have compassion. We teach them respect. And that's part of our curriculum. In saying all that, teachers have already anticipated concerns before parents had even seen the module. We've not done this yet. It's not been put out to the public. We would have started this right after a Christmas break here. We understand that, some of this language is objectionable. When we think about the author's intent, I could argue that his intent was to make our jaws drop. Oh my goodness, think about what happened and what it would have been like to have lived during that time period and that shock. So the author chose to use those words. We understand they are objectionable. We understand our community and our families, and that's not something that we see is needed to be spelled out in our book. So we felt it was appropriate to white that out. While we have what we have done in anticipation of any of those concerns, we prepared a parent letter to go home to inform them of this topic we are about to study. We went ahead and took the step to censor that explicit content, and we went ahead and made sure that all of our books are stamped property of MCS, so that if one does come up for some reason, hey, look at these words we are teaching in school. Nope, that's not one of our books. So every lesson we teach gives us a chance to make a change for the better for our students. When we teach habits of character, we are teaching our students how to be better people. There was a time where that happened every day at home, but when we think about what's going on now and in the lives our students live in, many of them live in broken homes when they are at one house one day and another house the next. I mean, the list goes on and on of the things they have to deal with. Whether we realize it or not, school is the most stable thing in many of our students' lives. what students see and hear where they live may not be appropriate in some settings. And we have a chance with every lesson to change what our students see is okay. We get a chance to kind of influence their ethics, their morals, their upbringing. Yeah, I appreciate the stand that you all are taking to assure the public that we care about our kids, and we believe it's important to teach our students the difference between right and wrong and help them be ethical people with compassion and morals with respect for others. We are not promoting the use of these words. If anything, we're promoting that these words are inappropriate, and it's best that we not use them. It's inappropriate for school, for our conversation here, and you may hear that at home. You may see that on TV, but we do not promote that. There are many lessons that can be learned through this book about how we treat others, how we speak, things we say, how we act, and how to persevere. I just wanted to get an idea of why these lessons are structured like they are, and how this text is just surrounded by excerpts and articles and the things we do to build that background knowledge and the opportunity we have to make a difference in our students' lives.
I believe I heard Miss Knight say a moment ago that there's not a book that can replace this one.
Not without redoing this whole module.
I ask that you go back to your Hoard's Dairy example. Not one time do I see a vulgar word in that paragraph there. My objection, and I apologize to everyone sitting here, is that my standard, no matter, and I am probably the biggest sinner and crudest person in this room, can I lay that in front of a child and say, read it? Or this is part of your reading assignment? I've got enough faith from the director of schools down to the newest hire in this building that you can take that module and rewrite it and make it do the same thing. Our children need to know about the Holocaust. They need to understand that there are several pieces of history, Mr. Bennett, that shows depression or suppression of certain ethnicities. It's not acceptable today. We've got to accept people for who and what they are. I'm just an old country school board member, and I think in our policy, it says the decision stops with this board. Unfortunately, Mr. Parkinson, we did not go through the complaint process that's also in our board policies. But Rob, the wording in this book is in direct conflict of some of our policies. If I said on the school bus that I was going to kill you, we would be bringing disciplinary action against that child. Again, I am the biggest hypocrite, but I wouldn't want to go to court that day. And somebody lay this book down and say it was taught in the classrooms. Therefore, Madam Chairman, I'm going to bring this to a head. I started it, so I'm going to bring it to a head. I move that we remove this book from the reading series and challenge our instructional staff to come with an alternative method of teaching the Holocaust.
Second.
Is there any further discussion? Other board members wish to comment?
Yes. We kind of jumped into the 7th and 8th and now the 9th inning on this, and I appreciate the presentation, Mr. Brady, on the background of how the curriculum is set. But we are here because some people objected to the words and the graphics used in the book. My bigger concern is that this is probably the tip of the iceberg of what is out there. The question I came tonight with, wanting to know, is what is our process? How do we vet the curriculum? I think it's impossible to ask you to read every line of every book or every anchor text, but somebody has. somebody has read that and made that decision, and there's got to be a review process and then a discretion made on what age appropriate level this should be presented and taught. I've read the background on this author and the series, talked to some educators, and it is a highly critically acclaimed and well-reviewed series in the book context. It's banned many places in Europe because of how critical it is against the heinous acts that were done. So it can be vetted either direction about the picture that it paints. But before we go and make any decisions, I think we need to understand the process and what discretion is used to determine what is going to be approved and age appropriate, because we might be throwing out a whole lot more things if we are going to take this stance and on just a couple of words. And I'm not minimizing that. Don't misunderstand my words, but on a few words, 8 words, I think you said, and one picture, before we move action, I would like to hear more about the process and the discretion that's used, how we got where we are.
I can help you a little bit with that. We have a textbook and instruction materials quality commission. This is who approves these curriculums for us. We have to adopt a curriculum that is approved by the State Department. This curriculum was high on the list in the State Department. They are responsible, Mr. Shamblin, for not necessarily vetting, but they do determine age appropriateness. It just so happened, to give you all a little bit of background on this, this commission and the State Department is made up of 2 directors of schools, a principal, 1 teacher or supervisor from grades K through 3, 1 teacher or supervisor from grades 4 through 8, 1 teacher or supervisor from grades 9 through 12, 1 member not employed in the education system of the state, and each of the 3 divisions. That's grand divisions in the state. That's West, Middle, and East, and that totals 9 members. The education commissioner or the deputy or an assistant commissioner of education serving with the commissioner's designee shall be an ex officio secretary of commission with the right to vote and shall serve without additional compensation. This is a state-approved curriculum. We ought to be asking questions a little bit further up the line.
I think further down the line is my perspective. What are we doing at the local level when we adopt that, when we choose to go and adopt that curriculum from the state's recommendations? What do we do to vet it and make sure it meets the standard that we want to present to our community and our children?
What I've been told from teachers, I thought we had a committee together to look at the ELA program.
Yes.
From the teachers that were on that committee and some teachers just in the school system talked to me about it, said basically the review, and if I understand it correctly, y'all can tell me if I'm wrong because I wasn't there. They came up with a list of 3 possibilities, submitted it to the office, but none of the 3 were chosen, and this ELA program was chosen instead without them vetting it. So why did we choose this one rather than go with the one they vetted and the one that they agreed and approved of?
To set the background, this ELA adoption was unlike any other adoption we've had as far as textbook goes. In the past, we were given a list of textbooks and any vendor could give you a textbook and you would be able to adopt anything, no matter what the state said. Starting with ELA, it was put off for a couple of years. They went through it and it was a very rigorous selection process where they found curriculum that they vetted and felt like it was appropriate for us to adopt. They put out an approved list, which was honestly very disconnected as far as they gave us, rather than just a curriculum that would go all the way up. Some vendors were approved for K through 2, some for K through 5, some for 6 through 8, some for high school. It was just very disconnected and very few went continuously up that. In doing that and seeing that, we put together a very large teacher team to come in. It was quickly seen. It was all over the place. Some like this, some like that. There was no cohesion at all. At that point, COVID hit. So that process was skewed just a little bit. But we did send out some surveys on what they liked to the teachers. They did vote, shared them with Mr. Parkinson at that point. The state had many more meetings just with the supervisors of the districts and directors of the school on what honestly their top 3 choices of what they thought were background building curriculum. That's where they were going with that. At that point, this one was going to be a cohesive curriculum from K through 8, and it was adopted with the best intent. I was not the sole person that made that choice, but it was one of my top 2 to choose from. Everything that was done with the best intent and the rules of following the adoption committee. And I think a lot of teachers support the curriculum. And we do have teachers that don't support the curriculum and don't approve of it. We are going to have that with any curriculum we have. I think we are doing the best to be proactive and trying to address the things that we see are going to be in just about any curriculum that builds background knowledge where we find words. Is this the only book with words like that we have seen? No, it's not. Not to that extent, but there are some other words. And I'm going to be very upfront with you and say that we've come across some with some language in there as well. They're throughout some of the books, but as a teacher, when I taught Bridge to Terabithia, I taught The Whipping Boy, To Kill a Mockingbird. Those are filled with language. And we read those as a kid too. I'm not justifying anything at all as far as foul language goes, but I think we try to do our best because I know there's been issues with just about every curriculum that's been adopted with things of this nature.
I'm not out for blood, but it bothers me. We have some teachers come together and they spend time looking at the curriculum and they give you 2 or 3 options and we go completely another way that they hadn't had a chance to vet. About every 2 or 3 months, I get a call from a teacher or a parent with some issues in this curriculum, whether it be from 1st grade, 2nd grade, 3rd grade, up to 7th and 8th grade. So I think we've gotten into this mess. At least if we have a teacher to buy off, you don't have 2 or 3 people left if something goes wrong.
They did have a chance to vet. The 6 to 8 curriculum is the one part of this curriculum that was still in the process of being this version was still in the process of being completed during that adoption process. So we didn't know the whole set of books, which we didn't with any grade level. K through 5 did have the option to vet.
But they didn't choose it, right?
Some did. I can still go back on my computer and find the survey results if I need to.
Does any other board member have any other comments or questions during this discussion? Because we do have a motion and a second on the floor.
Let's table that motion. I'll make a motion to table it until we can get a little bit more discussion. And then we can come back and make a motion. So I make a motion that we table the motion until we get a little more discussion done.
Mike has made a motion to table the motion. Do we have a second?
And the further discussion should be that we need to follow the process and procedures that we have in place for objectionable curriculum.
Do we have a second for that?
Yes, I made that second.
Okay, let's do a roll call vote. This is to table Mr. Pierce's motion of removing the book.
Table it until when?
Until we discuss it a little bit further. If we need to have that motion, then we can untable it.
But what are we going to do in the meantime?
There's a lot of discussion we hadn't even gotten to. So we need to do a little bit more asking questions and a little bit more investigating before we just jump into a motion, in my opinion.
As a point of order, Madam Chair, a motion to table is indefinite. So Mr. Cochran's motion to table would put it off indefinitely, and I would suggest that would also give the administration time to follow this board's policy of 4.403 to develop a rapport for the board to consider. Right now, you are trying to make a decision without the benefit of the review committee having gone through to look at this, and the administration has done a very good job trying to give you some information, but there is a process to be followed.
So we need to come to a vote for this motion.
I want to remind all board members to lay on the table as neither debatable or amendable when it comes to an immediate vote.
Vote was as follows. Rob Shamblin, yes. Tony Allman, yes. Jonathan Pierce, no. Donna Castile, yes. Mike Lowry, no. Mike Cochran, yes. Sharon Brown, yes. Quentin Howard, no. Bill Irvin, no. Denise Cunningham, yes. Vote results, 6 yes, 4 no.
Our motion does carry to table the vote to do away with the book.
I will start. I went to school here 13 years. I learned math, English, reading, and history. Never had a book with a naked picture in it. Never had one with foul language. In third grade, I had one of my classmates come up to me and say, "Hey, what's this word?" I sounded it out, and it was damn. I was really kind of proud of myself for sounding it out. She went straight to the teacher and told her I was cussing. Besides that one book, which I think she brought from home, now I've seen a cuss word in a textbook at school. So this idea that we have to have some kind of material in the class in order to teach history, I don't buy it. This is English language arts, and I've been told by teachers that as far as TCAP is concerned, there's no skills in here that this book teaches that they can pull off TCAP. That's what they're judged by, and that's what we're judged by. I'm not saying that there's not important material. I've read it through all of it, and the parts where it talks about his father's the guy that went through the Holocaust. I really enjoyed it. I liked it. There were other parts that were completely unnecessary. We're talking about teaching ethics to our kids, and it starts out with the dad and the son talking about when the dad lost his virginity. It wasn't explicit, but it was in there. You see the naked pictures, you see the razor, the blade where the mom's cutting herself. You see her lying in a pool of her own blood. You have all this stuff in here. Again, reading this to myself, it was a decent book until the end. I thought the end was stupid, to be honest with you. A lot of this cussing had to do with the son cussing out the father. So I don't really know how that teaches our kids any kind of ethics stuff. It's just the opposite. Instead of treating his father with some kind of respect, he treated his father like he was the victim. We don't need this stuff to teach kids history. We can teach them history, and we can teach them graphic history. We can tell them exactly what happened, but we don't need all the nakedness and all the other stuff. Not like this is the only book it's not like this is the only book that comes up. Again, every 2 or 3 months, I get something. I had a poem, again, 7th, 8th grade sent to me.
Mike, we're dealing with 8th grade.
That's what this was, the 8th grade.
You said 7th and 8th grade.
7th and 8th grade.
No, we're dealing with 8th grade.
All right, 8th grade.
Yeah, this poem, teachers, help me out. Is this poem in the 8th grade book?
No, ma'am. It's in the 7th grade, and it is a poem that we do not even do.
It doesn't matter. It's in the curriculum. All this stuff keeps popping up, so I want to read it. You guys can fire me later, I guess. I'm just wild about Harry, and Harry is wild about me. The heavenly blisses of his kisses fill me with ecstasy. He's sweet just like chocolate candy, just like honey from the bee. Oh, I'm just wild about Harry, and he's just wild about me. One of the discussion questions is to find what this word ecstasy means. Now, my problem is, all the way through this literature, we expose these kids to nakedness. We expose them to vulgarity. You go all the way back to 1st grade, 2nd grade, and they're reading books that have a picture of a naked man riding a bull. It's not vulgar, something you'd see in an art gallery, but it isn't necessary. So teachers have gone back and put tape over the guys' butts so the kids aren't exposed to it. So my problem is, it looks like the entire curriculum is developed to normalize sexuality, normalize nudity, and normalize vulgar language. If I was trying to indoctrinate somebody's kids, this is how I'd do it. You just put this stuff just enough on the edge so the parents don't catch it. Kids, they soak it in. I think we need to relook at the entire curriculum.
Do we have any other comments from anyone else about the 8th grade curriculum? Because that is what our agenda item is, and that is what we have to be discussing.
Back to the question about the local discretion that we use in our process, and thank you, Mel, for sharing. It's good to know that we have eyes locally looking and making that decision. In that arena, what would have stopped this from going forward had this not happened the way it happened? Would it have gone forward unredacted or redacted? Does that make sense?
We implemented that. We chose to do redactions.
So can we take it as far as it needs to go? Because I don't know that it is going to end with one book. I think the process needs to include a bigger plan to holistically redact things that we don't want in there. We hope we have good employees, like-minded culture, centric folks that fit with the McMinn County, that they're going to make the right discretionary decisions to redact that literature in an appropriate way for the age-related presentation.
After discussing with Mr. Parkinson, we felt that was best for our community, like you were saying.
My question goes further. Can we redact at a larger level than what we saw there? Why do we have to leave some of that? Why can't we gray all of it?
That is a legal question. There is a fine line between what is called fair use under copyright laws and what is protected. So if I'm an artist, whether it's an author or a musician or whatever else, when I put my creative energy into a product, I've got one cohesive product. And generally, if someone else comes along and pulls a bit out of this, then that's a copyright issue. Or if you put something into it, that's a copyright issue. You change this word to that word, that's a copyright issue. Where educators are free to make limited changes is where they are redacting some words that doesn't change the meaning of the text and doesn't change the feel of the text. If it's intended to be gritty and intention getting and a little uncomfortable, it still has to be when we're done doing your white line.
That's interpretation, right?
That's why they build courthouses and why we have lots of lawyers.
If we use that interpretation to suit our culture and what we want to present responsibly, we could potentially go further in what we saw exhibited here.
In my opinion, I think that they white it out as much as they can from this work without changing the character of the work. You have a lot of room within fair use. You can make edits that are consistent with the values of the school system. At some point, you go so far that you really should have just picked this one book. If we spent some time this week talking about this, I think your educators did a good job making the changes to get rid of the actual offensive words. In responding to the question earlier, if a kid had actually said the whole word, yes, you could have disciplined them because you took the word out and you're not supposed to say it. Had they gone further and maybe, we don't like the scene of the mice hanging from the tree. Okay, so now you are starting to move into the author's creative license. At that point, you are just changing their work.
But surely removing the full 4 letters of a 4-letter word doesn't change the intent of the author's whole book. It just cleans it up.
Copyright law always looks at it as a case-by-case basis. If someone were to look at it and were to say, I know what that word was, then you haven't done violence to the integrity of homework. If you delete more of it so that you're left guessing, at that point, you sort of have. At some point, the scale tips, so it's no longer within the bucket of fair use. It's very case by case, and I wish Mr. Shamblin. I could give you a yardstick to measure to say, okay, you can go this high and no higher. In this area, it's more about holistic approach. If it's gritty, it's meant to be. And if you change it to where it's no longer gritty, the author would say, you changed my work and created new work. That's a copyright violation.
So if we ban the whole book based on the words, what other books right now that are currently in use are we going to have to ban?
That falls under another topic for another day.
Madam Chair, if I may build on that, this board has a policy that allows people to opt out of material that parents believe to be inappropriate. I don't know if parents are aware of that. I would suggest most parents really aren't. So if this is something community people have a real concern about, I think that's where this board interacts with its constituents and says, we do value your input and there is a mechanism to opt out.
Well, yes, I have a question to that point. If that was the route taken and we have 30 kids in a class and all 30 sets of parents or whomever decides they didn't want their child to be reading that book, which I would agree with them, what would they teach? I mean, if we have something here that we can teach, do it now.
If we remove the anchor text specifically to this context, what's the solution? What is the next step?
I think the whole module would have to be rewritten in some way because it all stems around a graphic novel and it all stems around different types of writing styles. I think we would have to look somehow at finding another graphic novel of this rigor and trying to find anchor text to pull in with that.
Another reason this book was chosen for this module, it's the only Pulitzer Prize winning graphic novel that's out there. It's very highly acclaimed, and that's part of the reason why it was chosen for this project.
We didn't teach this last year, right?
No, we did not.
So what did we teach last year instead of this?
We got in late, Mike. We didn't get to teach but 2 modules.
3 modules instead of 4 because of the pacing with COVID. You know how we had our calendar and we had one day they had at home. They rewrote the curriculum for 3 modules instead of 4 because we wouldn't have been able to teach 4 full modules.
So this one got left out?
This was the one they suggested leaving out. Yes. The 3rd module usually in every grade level was left out.
Would it be possible for us to go to the next module? Obviously, there is a lot of discussion about pros and cons, and everybody has an opinion. So
Anything is possible. I wouldn't recommend it because the next module builds on this one. Not everything, but there are certain things they would miss that they would have learned here that carries on to the next one.
I would think that would be something that you could bring them up to speed on and use another unit that wouldn't be as controversial.
I will use my last discussion to say again one time that I have faith in the educators in this building. And if I can't find a text to teach those same modules, then I probably need to go back to one of my curriculum development classes. We've talked about curriculum development. Very good question, Mr. Shamblin. What's the process? I think the process was missed from the state textbook selection committee. I really question how a book of that nature could be let out of the Department of Education. We have a textbook selection committee that meets each year according to what group it is that is to be adopted. We've discussed other adoptions in here, and I believe our board policy says, and I will go on, that I'm going to accept the recommendation of that committee. I sure didn't see this one coming, and Mr. Brady, somebody should have, and you're in that new hot seat right now. Somebody in that selection committee, and probably some of you are sitting in here, should have caught that one. I cannot support laying that kind of language in front of your children. And I'm not as fortunate as you. I don't have that child to lay that book in front of. So therefore, you're way ahead of me. As long as I sit in this seat, I cannot support it, Mr. Parkinson. Don't tell me that there's not another book out there. They had to have more, Rob. They had a selection process. Another day, another topic, but somebody missed it.
I've been talking for months. I've not met a teacher yet that's satisfied with the ELA program. I've been saying that in this board meeting month after month. So we bear part of the responsibility because we aren't brave enough to actually look into it and see what needs to be done. We always limit to where we talk about just one little thing because we talk about bigger things until we actually have to do something. We need to look at our ELA program. We need to get our first and second and third grade teachers in here at a minimum and figure out where we're going wrong. I've got teachers telling me that they're not getting the standards they need. We stopped teaching them spelling in the fourth grade, and teachers say they need that. And they're not hitting the grammar like they need to, and whatever this ELA program is, it's not meeting what needs to be met. If this board has to stand up and take some responsibility, and either we got to deal with it, or we just can't keep shaking it off to somebody else. This is our responsibility as well. If your teachers tell you time and time and time again that this is messing our kids up, well, we got to take some action. This is just one book in the multitude.
Well, and tonight that is our topic.
It is, but that's the trick we always play. We can only talk about this tonight. So I will make a motion one more time, unless there's any more discussion. I would like to take it at a minimum, make a motion that we remove this book from the curriculum. That'd be a start. Maybe we can go from there.
I only have one question. How long does this book stay in our schools? Is this just going to be taught to the 8th graders this year or handed off to the others?
I was just about to bring that up. The high schools have adopted a separate curriculum, but this is in the freshman curriculum, the same book, and was taught last year in freshman classes and a digital version as well. We are not talking just 8th grade, we're talking freshman, but different curriculum vendor.
How long does this book stay in the school system?
6 years. We are on year 2, 4 more years.
Okay, we have a motion. Do we have a second? Do we have discussion?
Chairman Brown, we have somebody back here, I think, who wants to speak. I don't know if you want to recognize.
Hi, I'm one of the freshman teachers. I'm not trying to contradict Melisande, but I teach the 9th grade curriculum at McMinn, and that book is not part of our curriculum. We have others. We have the Pearson version. Not that I'm a fan of it, but...
Is that the older version?
No, we adopted a newer version when they adopted the older one.
I spoke to another system that was familiar with that book, but they are using the older version that doesn't have the same verbiage and graphics. I don't know what changed.
It was taught at the other high school last year, Central, and it's the same curriculum.
Okay, yeah, we didn't do it at McMinn. The books are meant to teach to the standards, which is what this curriculum is going to do. You know, develop the students' knowledge with the standards in an in-depth way, and I completely support that. Common Core for ELA makes complete and total sense. I can't speak for math, but I can for ELA. We're able to dig deep. We're able to look at things that we weren't able to look at before. When we taught to the old standards, I've been in the classroom almost 10 years. And when I taught 8th grade at Sweetwater for 5 years, and I taught the older standards, it was, okay, what's the main idea? And then we moved on and, okay, what does this word mean? It was very disconnected, like Mr. Brady said. Well, now our standards pull everything together. So you look at it in layered ways. I mean, I love the Holocaust. I've taught the Holocaust almost every year in the classroom, but this is not a book I would teach my students.
We aren't against teaching the Holocaust.
Oh, I know you're not. unless they have adequate background of the concept that's being discussed, they're going to miss it. Some of my freshmen this year still had a hard time connecting the dots and, being ethical, moral, all that other stuff. It's because they've not been in the classroom for nearly 2 years because of COVID. They're missing a lot of stuff that they might have had they been there. It's going to be a lot harder to get them to understand.
So thank you for your comments. We have a motion on the table and we're asking for a second.
May I correct you a little bit?
Yes, please.
The motion that I made was laid on the table. To bring that motion back off the table, and I think Mr. Cochran is ready to do this, he must move to take from the table. It requires a second. It is not debatable, not amendable. If it passes, the motion is then back on the floor for our discussion. If it fails, it stays on the table.
I will make a motion. We pull off the table, and then you take your motion back off the table.
Do we have a second for that?
Second.
Call for a vote. Our vote is the motion on the table is to remove the book.
No. The motion on the floor is to take from the table Mr. Pierce's earlier motion. So we are clear, it's going to come back before the board, and then the board can go back to the main motion.
So the motion is to take back off the table, and if it passes, then we open to discuss.
There you go.
He has made a motion to table. It passed. Only he can bring it back up to remove it. So he's going to remove it. You have a second from Mr. Allman. It's not debatable. It's not discussion. Now you're going to vote to remove the table of that motion of Mr. Pierce's.
Roll call, please.
Roll call vote was as follows. Denise Cunningham, yes. Bill Irvin, yes. Quentin Howard, yes. Sharon Brown, yes. Mike Cochran, yes. Mike Lowry, yes. Donna Castile, yes. Jonathan Pierce, yes. Tony Allman, yes. Rob Shandlin, yes.
Madam Chair, now you have the motion that came up from Mr. Pierce.
Mr. Pierce's motion that has been seconded. So we allow discussion, or do we automatically take a vote?
You allow discussion on this.
Is there any further discussion on the motion that's on the table?
To clarify, your motion was to remove this book from the classroom and have them replace it with something different, right?
My motion was to remove this particular book from our curriculum, and that, if possible, find a book that will supplement the one there.
We're in discussion, right?
We are in discussion, yes, sir.
Mr. Bennett, you're telling me there is no way we can remove every letter of foul language and every piece of the graphic that would incite or offend.
I hesitate to say no way. I can say that the more you remove, the closer it becomes getting outside of your fair use umbrella. I think if you remove part of the word so that you can still see what's there, but it's not the whole word, I think you're within the bucket of fair use. I think as you start to edit it for contents more and more and more, you get further from that umbrella of fair use. Now, to be practical, what's likely to happen is this author, I think he's in Switzerland. Is he likely to come and do something about it? I don't know. I know that there are a lot of people with a lot of money suing school districts for copyright violations. Not a lot around here, so I can only tell you what's safe. What your administration has done with this book is safe. Going any further might be safe, but please understand no one ever calls me to say, hey, we forgot to invite you to our daughter's birthday party. We hope you can make it. That comes with problems. I am by nature very cautious. We edited this as much as I am comfortable saying that you can edit and still be within fair use.
I don't think that there's really any retribution that we would face for removing 8 words in full and a graphic or 2 in full, if that permits us to use that book. But if it's more offensive than that, and I have not seen the book and read the whole book, I've read the reviews, then it's a bigger problem.
There's an option that we had discussed, and it's a little unusual. We could contact the author and ask for permission to do further redaction. If the author gives us permission, then we can do whatever we want with it. That would be unusual, but it's not unheard of.
But that would take a period of time.
And this is already in use, as I understand it.
Maybe, maybe not. The internet is an amazing thing. We could send an email tomorrow and might have an answer. It could very well be that in the time the administration is talking to try to find a substitute work, we get word from the author that he is actually fine with some extensive edits. So maybe what happens is the administration comes back to the board and says, what do you think about this? Here's a new text and here's a very edited mouse. Now I have gone from giving legal advice to foretelling the future, and that's outside of my license.
At that point, if it's been removed, it could be added back if there is no better alternative, I assume. I don't know what it's going to take to find an alternative.
No, it would probably mean we would need to have to move on to another module, and they would know better than I on that. Any further discussion? Because we do have a motion on the table to take the book completely out. No other discussion. I will call for a vote. This is yes or no vote for removal of the book.
Vote was as follows. Denise Cunningham, yes. Bill Irvin, yes. Quentin Howard, yes. Sharon Brown, yes. Mike Cochran, yes. Mike Lowry, yes. Donna Castile, yes. Jonathan Pierce, yes. Tony Allman, yes. Rob Shandlin, yes.
Motion carries. Is there any other business pertaining to this topic? Do I have a motion to adjourn?
Bill Irvin made the motion. Mike Lowry seconded. All were in favor.